Starting September 1st of this year, Texas will begin assessing a $200 registration fee for EVs, and totally expected, people have come out of the woodwork to start complaining about this, claiming that it's unfair, it is disincentivizing people from buying EVs, and undermining everything the federal government is trying to do. I, of course, have a slightly different take on it. So welcome back to All Cars Y'all. I am John, and the heart of the story is Texas has a new law starting in September 1st, 2023. They're going to start assessing a $200 a year registration fee for EVs and $400 at the time of purchase. And yes, needless to say, people have come out of the woodwork and claimed this is totally unfair. Now, according to my research, 33, including Texas, states in the union do charge registration fees. So it's not just an issue with Texas, except that Texas's is rather high. And so what this has become is another entry in the culture war here in America, claiming it's a red state issue. And so here's the point of having these registration fees is many transportation's infrastructure projects are funded by gas taxes or diesel taxes, and EVs don't use gas. So there has to be a way for the state to recoup money to help with the infrastructure projects for vehicles that are using it but not paying into it. And that's where these come from. But numerous articles have been coming out saying that it is, across the nation, disincentivizing people from moving to EVs. It's another barrier to entry. And specifically, that it's the red states that are the biggest problem because they have such a high fee. Now, as a comparison, California charges something like $100 a year, and it's been indexed to inflation. I think Oregon charges like $110, something like that. And other states, such as Texas, charge $200. And they claim that that's just blatantly unfair, and it's punitive towards EV owners. Well, let's take a step back here and look at gas taxes. The gas tax at the federal level was last raised in 1993 to 18.4 cents per gallon. And it was not indexed to inflation, so it has not gone up. Now, while inflation has increased and while construction costs have increased, the gas tax has remained flat. So even though the revenue has actually increased slightly, simply because we're selling more gas, the actual real-world dollars has been decreasing. In fact, if it was indexed to inflation, the federal gas tax would be somewhere around 30 cents right now. Now, of course, states can have their own taxes on top of that. Texas is about 20 cents. Other states are in the 30 cents. And so that's where they're getting the money for their transportation infrastructure. And again, people are saying it's unfair that Texas is charging so much for EVs. Well, there's a few different things at play here, and here's where I think it's an unfair criticism. See, that federal tax is completely inadequate. It should have been indexed to inflation, or it should have at least been raised by Congress over the decades. And I don't know any state where the gas tax actually fully funds transportation. Now, different states do different things. Some just point it towards, bridges and roads and ferries, while mass transit is handled by another fund. But I know in my state, North Carolina, I have heard somewhere between 30 and 50%, I think it's closer to 50%, of our transportation infrastructure is funded by a gas tax. And we have a relatively high gas tax. We're in the top 10, maybe the top 5 of the nation. But it's still only, let's say, 50% of what we need to fund our infrastructure. The rest of it comes out of the general fund. Now, to my eye, when most people own a car and most people are buying gas and most people are using the roads, then most of us who pay income taxes, having our general fund used is okay. But I do like simplicity and honesty and transparency in my government. To me, if you have infrastructure and you have a fund for it, this is where it should come from. And our politicians have been lying to us about what our gas taxes should really be to fund the infrastructure we need, literally for decades. So while many, including Jalopnik, which is the National Enquirer of auto news, has written articles saying that this is a red state issue, this is conservative Republicans attacking EVs, I look at it a little bit differently. I think that having a higher registration on EVs, as the general number of EVs is going to increase in the United States, it's actually righting a wrong for the past several decades. There is also an argument that EVs weigh more and therefore put incrementally more wear on the roads and the bridges and everything else. But having a higher registration fixes the problem of low taxes on the gasoline as we phase out away from gasoline. Very few people are saying we don't need something on EVs. Many people are saying that we need to have some kind of tax based on the miles driven and that it could be picked up every year during your annual inspection. Well, you could, but taxpayers really don't like surprises. And so if you go in for your state safety inspection, assuming you have one in your state, and all of a sudden there is a bill for $200, you're going to be ticked off and your representative's going to hear about it. So I don't see that really going anywhere. I think the registration fee makes the most sense. Also, people have looked into taxing the charging, but how do you do that in a house when it's all just electricity flowing into the house? It leads to a lot of issues around, honestly, personal privacy, in my opinion, as well as actually just how do you make this work. So the registration fee makes sense to me, but people are just arguing that it's too high. They don't seem to have a problem with California doing it, but they do have a problem with Texas. So let's say Oregon charges 110, that's perfectly okay. Texas charges 200. Oh, clutch your pearls. It's the end of the world. They are disincentivizing people from buying EVs. Well, most EVs are on the expensive side, and for the most part, the early adopters so far have been people who are more well-to-do, so you can afford more of a registration. And that's the argument we've had from progressivism all these years, is that it should be progressive based on your ability to pay. As EVs become more common, again, this higher registration fee, I think, is still fixing the underfunding of transportation all along, moving it from a gas tax, which is deeply, deeply unpopular. Voters very much dislike their gas taxes, and they very much push back against politicians who try to raise it. So this is an easier path. And again, I personally think it fixes decades of politicians just lying to us about where that money should actually be set at, those taxes. So here to wrap it up, one of the funny things from the Jalopnik article is they had a quote, "The new fees and taxes imposed by states like Texas could fall hardest on low-income people who can least afford it." Well, I'm here to tell you that low-income people are not buying your new EVs. This is a straw man argument, saying that a tax is too high or registration is too high because somebody, the least advantaged, are going to be able to afford it. Well, that's a false argument. These low-income people are not buying your $45,000 and $65,000 EV from Tesla or others. And the cheapest, the Bolt, would still be $20-ish some odd $1,000 after the federal tax rebate, and it's being canceled. So there are no low-income people buying brand new EVs because politicians have helped raise the price enough where nobody can really afford it. It's just another little quote of people throwing anything they can out there into the webosphere to try to convince people that these registration fees are bad, and saying that it is disincentivizing people. I don't know about that. I mean, we don't look at, or at least our politicians don't look at the $500 or $700 or $1,000 dealer fees that dealers charge and say that's disincentivizing people from buying gas cars. People don't look at the cost of safety and emissions and say that's disincentivizing people from buying it. But somehow $200 is going to be the decision. It wouldn't be for me. I think it's the $55,000 and $65,000 price to begin with, as well as having to install a something in my garage to charge it, and range anxiety when I take longer trips. There's a lot of other factors at play here. And if you're buying a car where you're getting $7,500 back from the government, $200 shouldn't matter to you. Let me know your thoughts below, guys.